Lead me in.
All right, should we start the show?
Hi, welcome to Platonics. I'm Jords.
I'm Rocky, and this is the show where we pull bits of media apart, see what makes them tick, and put them back together as role playing game sessions instead of whatever it was, whatever sad form they started their sad little lives
Some
in.
sort of passive experience that we turn into an active one.
Yeah, no passive watching here, only doing and
Who, who,
being.
who does the do men?
Well, yes. Um, shall we? Would you like to tell us what we're doing this week? Talking of doing.
Absolutely. It's the 1980s. We've just flown in with a gun on a plane, and that's cool because I'm a cop from New York. I've been having a little bit of problems with my wife, so I jump into a limo and we drive to Nakatomi Plaza for the Christmas party that my wife isn't even sure that I'm coming to. Thank God the kids are at home, because this is a party to remember. It's
It's
Die
Die
Hard.
Hard.
It's Die Hard, guys. We're doing Die Hard.
I was really hoping that you would segue into. I've been having some problems with jet lag, and I've heard that taking your feet off and taking your shoes off and rubbing your feet on the carpet will help.
It's not rubbing your feet on the carpet. It's making
It's
fists with your
Make your
toes.
fists with your toes, curling your toes in the carpet. So, what's Die Hard? If people have somehow not seen Die Hard, what is Die Hard? I acknowledge we're doing this in the wrong season. This is traditionally a Christmas episode,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish I'd thought of that in time to do it as our Christmas episode, but we didn't. We're doing it in March instead. So,
All right, Die Hard is a cop film, right? We got a cop who's fish out of watering because he's in a different jurisdiction. It's not what your regular. It's not your Dirty Harry kind of a cop, but he's the guy who's the everyman with like a special set of skills, which are just mostly don't die and be good on the radio. And
mm,
he goes up against a hostage situation where quote unquote terrorists, but really just thieves, have taken over a giant corporate building with the intent of getting into the vault and stealing their stuff.
hmm
It's sort of like a heist from the bad guy's perspective, but it's like a hostage negotiation and rescue from the good guy's perspective. And ultimately, it's a dungeon, baby.
Ooh, jumping straight into the hot takes. We'll dig into that one later. Yeah, Die Hard is it's like the progenitor of all of these like one guy against the world movies.
Using his wits and ability to crawl through overly large air ducts.
Yeah, I think really the core of Die Hard for me is that John McClane is having just a really bad day. Like like that's really the thing that happens in Die Hard is just this poor bloke in the middle of it all, just like keeps getting tortured and keeps having to like grit his teeth, often literally, and push through. Sometimes also literally push through things, and it's almost torture porn for like watching how much punishment this one poor guy can take. And the reason I bring that up, like right at the top, is because I think that this is one of those things where I'm like, I understand the title of the movie now. Like, it's one of the, it's
That's
one of
where
those
the
things where
bit
like
where John
you
McClane
say,
goes, "Thank God I'm not going to die hard," and the audience claps.
that's the name of the movie. Uh, it is a film where John McClane has to like really show a lot of what the child development specialists these days are calling grit. Uh,
In the 80s, that was just called being a man.
Yeah, so Die Hard fundamentally is a film about John McClane having a really bad day and pushing through anyway, and us as the audience like really getting in on the empathy of that. I think there's probably two things you need to know about John McClane, which is that he is a tough cop but with a heart of gold.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of just like two aspects to his character, and that's really the only two things that we get. We get his tough cop side, which is when he's doing all of his tough cop stuff, and then occasionally it's punctuated with his heart of gold, which is that he really cares about his ex-wife. I'm going to say Holly.
Oh man, I watched it last week.
I know, and I don't remember her name. I'm like 90% sure that it's Holly.
I do love how, like, he's flown across the country, he lands, he just wants to go wash up a little bit, and his particularly terrible day sort of begins with him being barefoot and shirtless.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, imagine if you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna take my shoes off. Sure hope no terrorists burst into this building. It'd be really inconvenient for that to happen while I'm not wearing shoes.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is one of my favorite bits of the whole film is that you, and I suppose we're getting into the bits of the film that make it the film now. John starts with nothing. He doesn't start with his full like cop belt full of, cop gear.
He's not
He doesn't
Batman.
I was literally about to say he doesn't have a Batman like utility belt full of stuff. He doesn't even start the movie with shoes, which they just make so sure to take advantage of when they do the whole scene where he has to walk across the broken glass. Like it really is just him and everything he picks up along the way. He's accumulated that.
I mean, to be fair, he
gear.
does have a handgun.
Look, yes.
He doesn't have shoes or a shirt, but he does have a handgun.
It is a fun combination, yes. The no shirt, no shoes, yes gun, loadout. It's a controversial setup. It's a controversial build. Yeah, so he starts literally with nothing. And so I guess that's probably the first thing to kind of note as we start to pull together the pillars of this film is that it is not a show about the gear.
No.
It is not a show about the gadgets or the contents of your inventory in any way. This is a show about essentially, I was going to say wits, but sometimes it is just like
grits
and wits. There you go.
Oh.
If we did Zinger episode titles, I'd call this one Grits and Wits, but we don't.
All right, we're going to come back to that one. I'm just going to write that down for later.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of more like a lot of indie roguelikes in that you just start with absolutely nothing. And like, it's a significant moment when he kills the first guy and then writes on his chest, haha, I have a machine gun now. It's like, I have teched up. I have leveled up to the next tier of threat to you.
Do you know what I like fascinating like inversion? I'm sure I'm not the first one to think of this, but a fascinating inversion of that is like if you are playing Die Hard as Gruber, like that movie is like Alien. Right? Like
yes.
Die Hard is a monster movie or like maybe even like a slasher movie.
No, I
from
think
the point of
Alien
view of
is great because he's even crawling through the vents and you're like trying to track down where he's gone in this space, this constrained environment.
Yeah, and they're like, haha, I have a machine gun now. It is a perfect like, from the other point of view, like that is like a full antagonist move to like try and stir up the protagonist's party. Like, yeah, that is not the direction I plan to take this conversation, but I think that's a fascinating way to think about it. Is like Die Hard is a monster movie, but from the point of view of a monster.
This is now Die Hard two ways, where if you want to be the terrorist or the hostage taker, you've got options.
I mean, look, I'd give it a go, and I'd probably do it in a quiet year.
All right, we have reached the point in the show where we only reference ourselves now. So, pillars of Die Hard. All right, I'm going to list a couple of things that we have in the film. I want to hear your take on how important you think they are. So, at the very beginning, we have a constrained location, Nakatomi Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
We have a hostage situation, and it is not in our protagonist's best interest to let the hostages die.
Yep.
A, because he has a personal connection. B, because he's a cop and like, protect and serve, yada, yada. Then we've got like an external force, a third party that's trying to help ostensibly, but they often make it worse. And that's the special response teams and the regular police officers, the FBI that show up.
Mm-hmm.
We have a communications channel that's open to everyone.
Mm.
All parties can hear what is being broadcast on the radio. So
Yeah, that one's interesting.
I really love that as a mechanism.
I had that one down and it hadn't twigged to me that maybe the fact that everyone can hear is a really important part of it, but I think you're right.
It gives great justification for the bad guys to know what's happening. It's like the good guys on the ground want to let the good guy in the tower know what's coming his way, but then the bad guys will also know. Like, I just really love the dynamic that forms between having those 3 different or 4 different parties, even because there's one sympathetic guy in the police force on the ground and lots of unsympathetic guys in there.
Mm.
Lots of agendas all in one channel. Love it.
Mm.
And then we've got the actual bad guys who have a complex plan to overcome layers of security. So they've got like a strict timeline that they're working towards and an exit plan at the end. Are there any other bits that you think are critical to this? Because like we've got Argyle, the limo driver, who's great comedic relief and lives downstairs in the basement, happily oblivious to most of it, but he doesn't actually play a critical role in the film.
Yeah, I think that's the big ones. I think for me, the really key pillars are, yeah, you've got the titular John Diehard. You have
Mr. Hard, yeah.
And his various like character attributes, his various like his starting position, I guess, is quite interesting. Yeah, you have these forces on the outside who are quite limited in their capacity to provide a direct help, but the help that they can provide is almost entirely in the form of information. And yeah, I think it's really interesting that, yes, that information is actually necessarily, or in this case, happens to be shared with the opponents as well.
And when the FBI takes over, the assistance they provide is on a like statistical probability of minimum casualties. So they're like, oh, we might lose 20% of them, but we'll get the bad guys, and that's acceptable losses. Whereas John's position is, I don't want any of them to die.
We can do better. I think probably the one thing that you've missed, and it's whether it's an important structural thing, I don't know, but it's certainly an important tonal thing, is that Gruber is a truly punchable villain. Like
That's very true, yes.
we have a great villain who may be one of the like best, villain portrayals in cinema, and a great dragon. Sorry, by dragon I mean second in command. You have a great sidekick to that villain as well, who sort of offsets the classic effete sort of false gentlemanliness with brutality. Yeah,
I think it's worth jumping into the composition of our bad guys, because I think this is one of those like archetypal crews that works really well as discrete challenges he has to overcome.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's, again, we'll dig into it a bit, but I think it is fascinating to think about this from the point of view of like, okay, set up a heist game or prep a heist game or prep a heist scenario, and then set that to one side and put yourself in the, I was going to say put yourself in the shoes, put yourself in the lack of shoes of the guy who's trying to disrupt it.
Put yourself in the white singlet.
and taped to the back handgun. Yeah, like it's almost like prep a whole heist and then figure out how to break it. But yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more in terms of, I guess, the crew, the villains.
All right, so we've got our gentleman leader who is extremely well educated, thinks pretty quickly on his feet, is like the guy with the plan, but absolutely is ruthless and merciless. Will happily shoot someone in the face, and does so at least twice in conversation. Then we've got his offsider, who's like the big brute of a guy. Looks like a 80s powerlifter with incredible hair. We've got their like technical specialist, the nerd who's the safecracker and all things technical. We've got a guy who's good at like the building systems, who like make sure that the grates can be lowered and pulled down. that the phone lines are cut to the entire building, all of that action. And then we've got a bunch of mooks, and those mooks have relationships to each other. And I think that's really important.
Why is that important?
Because it sets up really fun situations where you can taunt the mooks. So, for example, the first guy that John Diehard kills is the brother of the big bad lieutenant. So now there is a personal vendetta that he leverages to make that guy lose his cool. He forces action. It allows him to be somewhat proactive in forcing action from the bad guys. And I really like that as a, like, if they're all faceless, like, special forces team guys, their discipline's too high. They don't play like that. But in this case, they are a crew of friends and relatives who are all united in the mission to get very rich. And they don't want to die trying. And when you make that happen, it makes them mad.
Yeah, they're not a disciplined crew. They can be tilted.
And like we see right at the very beginning, as the truck pulls up and the crew rolls out and they start doing things, like the guy who's drilling into the electrical cabling and everything is literally racing against his teammate who's ready to just start sawing things up. So it's like, they've got the master plan to steal $640 million worth of bearer bonds, but they're still pretty rapscallion-y. They're a bit rough, haphazard. One of them is really disciplined, and the rest of them aren't, but they're good with gun.
Yeah, I like that a lot. All right, what else have we got?
The other thing that really comes across about Nakatomi Plaza, like we said before, it's a constrained location. It's full of like environmental obstacles. Traversing this area is tough. The lifts are out of action. You can still manually climb up and down them. There are big enough air vents that allow you to transport yourself with some level of stealth that's often compromised. There are office buildings with all the accoutrement that they have, but then there are also construction sites with power tools and like half-framed walls and broken glass everywhere.
And importantly, big open places where there should be windows but aren't, that you can throw people out of.
We have like the roof, which acts as a fantastic access point for certain things like helicopters. We've got huge air ducts and spinning fans that have to be navigated. We have a giant vault that is purpose built to hold like $500 million worth of goods in there. Like there's a lot of fun, actionable environments in this whole place, and the way that they are connected, like the strict spatial layout doesn't necessarily matter, but the way that they're connected provides different ways of engaging and different risk levels with transitioning between these spaces. And notably, the bad guys aren't holed up in a fortress situation. By necessity, they are distributed throughout this location, which means that you don't have just like, well, I have to do a frontal assault as me, the one guy. Now you've got all of these key locations that like John McClane is able to like pull people towards because of assets.
And pick them off, yeah. I want to dig into maybe a little bit more the guy in the chair trope, like John's guy on the outside, and what getting help from the outside in terms of just moving information back and forth looks like. That's either John moving intel out, so about what he's doing and what the bad guys are doing, but also you've got your guy on the other end of the radio moving intel in. So that's about knowing what's coming next, I guess, from the other cop's point of view. We see this used, I think, in a couple of ways. So you can use it to sort of ask directly for things to happen. So you can say, hey, send the dudes in or don't send them in. And whether or not that request actually gets actioned is kind of depends on the relationship that you've built up there. But you also have the cops outside kind of making plans based on what John is telling them eventually, once they kind of learn to trust him. And so I think it's really interesting that a part of what John is doing is he's not necessarily just trying to disrupt the plan. but he's also playing the role of like feeding information to the rest of the good guys who can't necessarily come, or the good guys, feeding information to the rest of the, I guess, rescue forces who are outside, who don't necessarily want to act just yet, who are maybe a little bit too obsessed with negotiating to get the hostages free. So, yeah, a huge part of what Johnny is doing, or at least a significant part of what he's doing, is trying to feed these guys not just the information that they need, but trying to like shape what is happening outside the building as well, just by like trying to sort of tell them what to do and give them the information that they need.
It's an interesting situation there because I actually view the outside police intervention as largely obstructive.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Like, I don't know that there's a single case that makes life easier for John and the hostages inside.
Yeah.
Like, it almost feels like John is mitigating. You know, like when you've got that friend who really wants to help but just fucks everything up? He's like the babysitter for this, trying to mitigate the damage that they cause. Because they're not taking him seriously, and every successive person who's in charge on the outside has some agenda that they're like, oh no, we can ignore this guy on the inside. He could be a plant. He could be a mole. Al, the cop on the outside, knows who he is from his attributes, but everyone else disregards that.
Mm.
Now, here's my hot take. If we stripped all of the police negotiations layer out, would this still be Die Hard?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. I think that does two things. Firstly, it gives the film a way for John to have a conversation with someone who's not a villain. And so it gives us a venue for John to have downtime to explore his backstory a little bit, to build some like empathy with this character. I think that's really important.
It gives him emotional recovery time because Al acts like his therapist on the outside.
Is it a crucial part of like what you would want from a Die Hard like experience? Hard to say whether that is like totally essential, but I suspect no. I suspect if that was missing, you wouldn't notice.
I like sitting there analyzing. I was like, what do they actually provide, these outside cops? And it's a couple more kicks. They provide bangs where it's like, this is the bit where they're choosing to go in and the bad guys have to react to that. But John doesn't necessarily get involved in a lot of that, except for when the cops are trying to roll up in their armored vehicle and he stops the guys with the rocket launcher from killing them. So like, it does provide a little bit of more, what's the word I'm looking for here? It gives him a reason to act under pressure. Like, act now or those guys in the van die.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think primarily, and that was the second thing I was going to say, it's like it's an emotional thing or an emotional release for John, but it's also like it is the driving source of like time pressure throughout the film. Not necessarily just the cops, but the like interplay between the cops and the hostage negotiator and Gruber, and like whether or not they're through the vault yet or not. Like, I think just getting into the vault is not enough of a ticking clock to push the plot along. I think the big thing that having the building surrounded by friggin' tanks essentially by the end provides is pressure. It's pressure on the villains, which then becomes pressure for the protagonists.
Which Gruber has planned for this, right? The cop showing up is actually an integral part of his plan because he needs them to cut power to the building for the final lock. So they do provide a nice like interweaving there of this is actually playing into the bad guys' plan. So like there is an interleaving there, but I think you could still pull that out and have an alternative thing providing time pressure. I don't think it has to be the police presence. They're useful in the context of the film, but I don't think they are an identity element for a Die Hard vibe.
I think you're right.
The one other thing that I do like about it, though, Yeah, we do have a developing relationship between prime antagonist Gruber and our protagonist John, in that at the start he's just a thorn in the side, but then over time, as information about John leaks out.
And importantly, as John continues to screw things up, yeah, they learn more about each other. They kind of needle each other more and more. And by the end, they are, I think, truly hate each other. Where at the start they kind of didn't, and I think
Yeah,
that's
there's an indifference that grows into true animosity. It's the opposite of enemies to lovers. It's enemies to deep hatred. All right, so if we boil it down, what are the things that are critical for this to be Die Hard, the vibe? What's non-negotiable?
I think you've got to have an underdog protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
You have a hateable villain who becomes more hateable as you go. The villain is running some kind of heist, they're running a job, and the hero is essentially trying to disrupt that job. I think that's kind of the core dynamic.
Mm-hmm. I think the hostage situation is necessary, and I think the protagonist has to have some moral imperative
Yeah,
to protect the
I
hostages.
I'm trying to I'm like, does it have to be hostages? Hostages are certainly the easiest
I
way
think
to provide
hostages
that
actually
pressure.
provide really fertile ground for complications.
Yeah, yeah, because they as we see several times in the movie, they have opinions and can take actions on their own, which usually ends badly for them.
Agency, but bad.
What if agency but bad? Look, I think you could construct something that would work instead of a hostage situation, but I think a hostage situation is the obvious solution.
And then finally, I think the location is also really important. So, constrained location with lots of distributed points of interest that have multiple ways of getting around them.
Mm. And lots of actionable, destructible environments, even if they don't necessarily make sense for a building of that sort in that era.
What do you mean? Events aren't big enough for people to crawl through? What are you talking about?
I actually don't think it's a super complicated one.
No. All right. Shall we structure a session to replicate that vibe?
Yes. So before we go into the session, I do have one question that I want to kind of problematize at you.
Problem me, daddy.
Does Die Hard work for a party?
Oh, yeah. This was a really good one that I was sitting down and trying to pick apart. I think it can.
How? He's kind of got a man on the outside in this one. In later movies in the franchise, which we aren't talking
I
about,
don't need to exist.
in later movies, he gets a sidekick. So that's kind of a two-person dynamic. I feel like they almost take the place of the guy on the outside, the guy on the radio. I struggle to think of how you run this for a party of players. And I have an interesting thought about how you might do that, or how you might turn this into something a little bit unique and interesting. But I want to hear what you think first.
So, my big problem with this is that it feels weird to have, 3 to 5 John McClanes all running around in the same place doing the same thing. I think you have to set the situation so that they are dispersed at points, like you actively want to split the party at points, so that they can achieve something greater by being apart from each other and not walking around like a murder hobo death ball. Because that doesn't feel like John McClane in Die Hard.
No, they're kind of doing the same thing as the villains, or you said the villains were doing, where they're like, the villains have points that they want to hit around the building, and we kind of want the player characters doing the same thing.
I think so. I think we want to have them like luring action groups of bad guys into places so that things are less defended. I think still you want the party to be relatively underpowered compared to the bad guys, because if it just turns out that everyone has guns, then it just turns into more like a location dungeon crawl where you show up, kill everyone, move to the next room. We don't want that. We want the same areas to be reused. So we want the party to be able to move through them and lure people around.
Yeah, so I think that gives you something really cool, which is that if you start the players kind of dispersed, then everyone gets that feeling of being alone, right? Like that's a big part of the film is that John McClane, at least for the first chunk of it, has nobody. He's flying solo, and then he gets access to the radio and gets access to his man on the outside, and that's a big like, okay, now he's not alone anymore. And I
He's straight
think
up beating himself up for not solving the problems at the very beginning. But once he gets that radio and gets to talk to Al on the outside, he doesn't have to torture himself anymore. He understands that he's a part of a bigger whole.
Yeah. And I think having the players start separated is a really good way to like have that moment where you realize you're not alone and you don't have to do this alone, be a part of the game. I think that actually could be quite effective. So it starts to make me think of things like zombie apocalypse media, where the party grows over time as you find new survivors who are kind of holed up on their own, and everyone kind of joins the crew one at a time, and each little like accumulation is kind of a big moment. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's a similar kind of dynamic where you have people who are maybe have in the short term become used to being alone, and you have them sort of coming together for these like moments of these like really great moments of initial distrust to working together. I think if you can find a way to bring that into the game, you end up with something that again starts to feel die-hardy and doesn't just feel like a shoot fest.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we can make a party-based Die Hardy game. We just have to be clever about how we structure this and provide the opportunities for the players to do Die Hardy things and not default to room crawling.
So let me ask you another question then. How do you deal with the information imbalance there? Because you don't necessarily want to start everybody out with, I guess, radios, but you still want to engineer a way for them to end up meeting other people without necessarily having this like metagame thing of zooming out and looking on a map and them making their way towards each other on purpose. So how do you engineer those meetings without having it feel like that's what they're working towards on purpose for the players?
I mean, from the beginning, they have to know that other people exist, right?
Yep.
So in world, our characters have to be aware of the existence of each other, and they have to know who is and is not being held captive. So I think what this looks like is the starting bang. We can reform a little bit. We can take what happens in the movie and we can customize that for each player or each character. So what happens at the start of Die Hard is everyone's having their Christmas party, and John has just arrived and has like a tense conversation with his wife and then wants to wash up before he comes out. And that is his excuse to be away from the main group as the terrorists, thieves, come in and take over the place.
Yeah. And that almost becomes a starting question for each character, right? Like I think you start with, why were you not in the room when the hostages were taken, right?
See, I actually think there's a bit of value if you go just a beat before that. And I would like to play a little vignette for each character at the beginning to say, like, let's just say it's a Christmas party or something like that. Everyone has some personal connection to it, but they're outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, maybe one person is from the cleaning company and they're not actually a part of this crew, but they're just wrapping up for the end of their shift. Maybe one person has like recently been fired and is clearing out their desk, or something along those lines. We've got reasons for them all to be here, but they're outsiders from the main group. And I would like to have a scene that establishes what their personal connection is for why they don't want these hostages to die.
Yeah. Does that have to be a scene, or can it be something where we have that connection be in play as part of the character creation?
I think it could be. I think it would be fun to have we're just doing this for like 2-3 minutes. This is like the short conversational piece where it's like you're talking to this person and you can see that there's a lingering discomfort around this unresolved issue that you've got. Where do you go to cool off and think about this?
Yeah.
That gives you your plausible excuse for why you've exited the room, but you also kind of know who is and who isn't at the party at that time.
Yeah. I think we're both coming at this from the same, or both coming at like two different ways of doing the same thing, which is that we have a couple of questions that we want to answer, and we can either answer those on the character sheets and kind of do that in a format. Maybe that's a format that suits itself better to like pre-gens or con play, where you can just be like, here's your character sheet, just like read through the answers so everyone knows who you are. Or we can play through that, but in a very, very lightweight way. But I think the questions that we want to answer are like, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
And then almost like, why were you not there? Like, why are you there? Why were you not there? Like, why are you at the party, but why were you not in the room when the hostages were taken?
Yep.
Really are the big two.
That's what's got to be answered.
And I guess 3, why do you care about the hostages?
I think, like, from my perspective, I would like every player to have their opportunity, their little spotlight moment, to say that out loud to everyone else in context, in a way that I think sometimes gets lost if you're just doing it during character creation. So if I reserve like 15 minutes at the start of the game just to run through the different players here and say, here's the scene that we've set, you walk in and you see like your coworker cleaning up your desk. You've just been fired on the day before Christmas. Run through all the other players like that, give them their moment in the spotlight, and then in walks a man with a gun.
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, I think that's how I would start this off, to give us that opportunity and kind of explicitly frame step 1 is find friends.
Yeah.
And while you're finding friends, I think this is the big architectural backbone of this scenario, is the heist is happening and I've prepped the series of bangs that occur through the evening.
Yeah.
So Die Hard the movie has the really easy one. There are 7 layers to the vault. It's such an easy tracker that's right there. And they're like, okay, we've got through the first couple. And then later we come back and, well, we've got through the next couple. But I'm telegraphing that when I get to the last one, that's going to be really hard to get through. A different bang needs to occur for that to be undone. And then when power to the building is cut, now we're inside the vault and we move to the next bang, which is extraction. We've got to get all the goods from here down into the van downstairs. And then the final bang would be they get away. So I'm prepping that timeline of events of bad guys need to be in these locations at these points in time to accomplish these micro objectives. And that's your opportunity to fuck with them.
Yeah.
It's now my job to give the information on what those micro objectives are so that the players can come up with clever plans to disrupt it.
All right, so our first phase of the game for the players is to find each other. What's phase 2 once they've made contact?
Phase 2, I think, is a little bit up to the players what they want to do, because it's like, do you want to stop the bad guys? Maybe that ties to their motivations. Or do you want to save the hostages? And that ties to their motivations. Is it some combination of the two of them? Can we tie those two objectives into the same thing?
And if forced to choose, what is it going to be? Are you going to save the hostages and let the villain get away? Or are you going to stop the villain from escaping and going on to do future nefarious deeds, but at the cost maybe of some hostages? Maybe there's a way you can do both. Maybe that's an opportunity where maybe if things haven't gone entirely the player's way over the course of the game, it's a great like success with consequences moment for the scenario as a whole. But yeah, I think leaving that open is really important. That's why we're doing a role-playing game and not, making a movie.
I think you've touched on something super important there as well. You are able to produce these hard decisions that have to be made by the characters where they can't do both things at the same time. This whole structure provides hard decisions the game to be run.
Yeah. Are you going to walk over the glass?
Yes, because the alternative is death.
I mean, you could have chosen death.
All right. We haven't talked about the location yet. which I think is something that has to be prepped. Like,
Absolutely.
I agree that I don't want the players to have like a map to begin with, but I would like them to build out chunks of a map as the game goes on. It's like
Hmm.
maybe the classic example that I've used in modern role playing games, like modern scenario role playing games, is like you get to the fire stairs and there's an evacuation map.
Mm.
So it's like the map is constrained to certain points that you can get for different layers of it, but it's not immediately available at the start. And that becomes a reason why players would want to be proactive in assembling their knowledge of the space.
I think liminal horror does something really interesting in that space where it gives you a something that is a lot like a fire escape type map that's completely blank and it gets filled in as you go, partly kind of by DM fiat, partly by like some player input. But yeah, I think you could easily come up with a thing where like, okay, we don't know what's in the next room, but we kind of know the rough layout
Mm.
of the floor.
I think that is very much what I would like to have. Like, I don't need. There are 7 offices on the right and there are 4 on the left. There is a service cupboard in here. I just need to know the vibe of this area is a construction site.
Yeah.
This area is where the big ducks feed into the lower levels.
And I think you don't necessarily have to, because this is kind of thing that liminal horror does quite well. It's kind of an exploration game. You don't necessarily have to know what goes into that room from the start. You can do the thing that we talk about a fair bit on the show where you like have your structure, and in this case it's perhaps the floor plan of the building, a very rough floor plan of the building. And you can have your content, which is like in this room there is broken glass on the floor. In this room there is like a mook and a tech like trying to
Mm-hmm.
work on the building systems. Like you can almost slot those in as the players sweep rooms and clear rooms. And the other thing that liminal horror does that's quite good is that there is kind of a penalty for backtracking. So if you backtrack, there's always a risk that that room has refilled with a fresh
Mm.
challenge. It hasn't fundamentally changed, but like something else might have moved in.
I do
And in that
really
case,
like
it's
that.
like an eldritch horror, but it could be the mooks have come in behind you. So there's a cost to moving backwards away from the goal, which I think is, or moving backwards is not free. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's not free.
That's certainly something that in a traditional like 5e style dungeon crawl, where the dungeon doesn't have turns and you're not rolling for random encounters and such, like there's often no penalty for just going backwards, and
Mm.
it kind of ruins the sense of timekeeping in a game. But I think for this, if we've got a pipeline of bangs that are prepped, some method of tracking time or turns or rounds or whatever abstraction we're talking about is important. And we do want to have that. We've contextualized the scene. Now, if you go back through it, something is different about it. Because if it's the same, that's not very interesting gameplay.
Mm.
So I don't mind that at all. I was visualizing in my mind a point crawl that's constrained to like a 3-dimensional shape of the building. So rather than having really strict, these are the doors and these are the rooms, I just mark down which doors would be interesting and which rooms would be interesting and what the transitions which might be obvious between them, like this is a hallway that connects you, to this is an elevator that connects these floors, to this is the hidden pathway of ducts or fire stairs or something like that that are distributed.
Or like there's a gantry outside the window and you can go around
Yep,
the outside of the building. Yeah.
great one. Or, if you manage to get up to the roof, then you can maybe abseil down to any other space
Somehow.
using a fire hose as you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my version was location crawl. I haven't played liminal horror yet, it's still on the to-do list, but that sounds like a really conducive structure to establishing the fiction without over prepping.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like yeah, again, it doesn't have to be like a floor plan, floor plan. It can be a little closer to I think what you were talking about where we've got all of these spaces and then we find out what's in them as we go. Um, you don't have to necessarily have them narrating every stairwell,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
but yeah, that's
that's
kind of
not the
how I
interesting
would.
part of the game.
That's not the interesting part of the game. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I would be structuring it is a map and a series of challenges, and you are matching the challenges to the points on the map to kind of moderate your pacing and tension as you go. So you have your like stack of things sort of prepped, and then you're almost it's that thing where it's like you almost want to imagine the game master with like a hand of cards, and these are the cards that you are going to play in any particular situation. Like, aha, I'm going to play the four mooks and construction site like down in this space. Like, off you go. And so that kind of lets you, as the game master, think about like, where are we at in our storyline? Is it time to throw down a villain? Have we had too many combat encounters in a row and we're ready for something environmental? Is it time for one of those kicks that we're talking about where like they're about to make it through another vault door to come up? And so, okay, whatever they find in the next room is going to be something related to that. Like, oh, this is where the conduits run through. Or this is, this happens to be above and they're going to tunnel through the floor into below. Like, I think thinking about it like one room at a time or one location at a time as your kind of ticks on your clock, ticks on your pacing, timing clock, I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I see how that maps pretty well to maintain the vibe while giving you a nice structure to work in. The notion of having cards, like I was going to bring this up as well. If we've got the location, we've got the timeline, we also need an adversary roster. Like, how many bad guys are there? Which ones are special? And where do they need to be at any point in time? Because we're going to assume that most of them are mobile.
Mm.
The guy in the van, probably not. He'll be located in the spot where the vault is as he starts working through it. Maybe like the guy who guards the front door and acts as the gatekeeper stays there so that he can bluff, helpers away. But everyone else is relatively mobile, and having them on cards means that you've kind of already organized them into little action groups that you can deploy.
Yeah.
And they're finite. So it removes a bit of element of GM fiat there and kind of shows to the players that you're playing real with them.
If you wanted to be really extra, you could get out like a Guess Who board and like flick down the ones the players have eliminated as you go.
That is a play aid I have never used.
There is a bit of that in the movie because we do, like as you said, the party of villains do have unique personalities, and so you can be like, okay, well, you've eliminated this one and you've eliminated like the one with the stupid hair and you've eliminated the one with the stupid jacket. Like,
that would be very fun and like very satisfying for the players to like that plastic click clack of slapping them down when they've been eliminated.
I know this started as a stupid idea and now I think it's maybe the core of my whole pitch for how you should run a Die Hard game.
Like, notably, I think one thing that typical dungeon crawl baddies don't do is retreat, but these bad guys will retreat when things go against them. They're not going to stand there and fight until they die. So I think it could be fun if you have like, oh yeah, there's 3 of them setting up the like stationary weapon or something like that. And you manage to take out 2 of them and the third one bundies it out of there. Slap 2 of those people down. That third guy's still there.
Yeah. No, I like this more and more.
The one thing that cards does restrict you from is unless you're jotting new cards down in play, it doesn't allow you to remix those action groups together. So if like, Carl escapes and he was on a card that had like Carl Friedrich and Carl 2. God, I hate coming up with names on the fly. If Carl escapes, then it like, unless you're writing him down on somebody else's card to create a new action group, that's really easy to do in mental space, but to show it dynamically.
I started with cards as a metaphor, as like, think about the things that you have available to play as if the GM has a handful of cards. And now I've turned them into physical cards. And yes, that does come with logistical issues. But maybe
a table might be a suitable alternative.
Never.
Because in my mind,
They're
there are
just so boring.
two tables here, and one is the bad guys, and the
And the
other
other
one
is
is
like environmental challenge. Yeah. Or hazard.
the environmental challenge. I think this is where we call back to the nature of a Christmas party at a fucking coked up corporate event. I think there's such fertile ground for people to fuck things up and become part of the challenges. Because,
Like guests,
like, imagine
yeah.
two married co-workers, but not to each other, are also not in the same room as everyone else when the hostages are taken because they're banging in the toilets. Or someone was doing cocaine up here and like shows up awkwardly and causes a stir, and like they're gonna get executed unless you step in to help. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to be the environmental obstacles that you can roll up
Mm,
in a very funny way, because like those
yes.
things happen in the movie as well.
I think that's true. And I think this is one of those things where the table doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to feel beholden to rolling
Yeah, it's the
on the
classic
table.
roll or choose.
Roll or choose. Yeah.
Like, oh, we need a little bit of downtime. It'd be funny to have like a coked up sales exec suddenly rock up in the middle of this.
Mm.
And like,
Yeah. And it lets you have those encounters that are just flavor and not necessarily combat.
yep. Notably, we've already discussed that this is not a game of attrition. This is not a dungeon crawl where you're expending resources as you go along, because you start with no resources and you're teching up as you go.
If
So
anything, you're actually accumulating resources, which is another thing that liminal horror does really well, to the point where I'm like, maybe I just, not to skip ahead, but
you
maybe.
already have, bud.
um, but liminal horror, you start with 10 empty inventory spots and you're expected to fill them as you go. But also wounds take up an inventory slot.
Mm,
So the more beat up your John Diehard gets, the like
less stuff they
fewer
can carry.
the fewer gun you can carry. You have to carry your like injured feet the same way you have to carry your handgun taped to your back. Yeah, I think that could be a really fun. I have to think about whether that is going to match the like arc of the story, if like accumulating injuries and ending up maybe in a worse place at the end than you are midway through.
I mean, I do like
No, I think
if the
that
action
works. I
converges you
think
to
you
the showdown, but you just have to get by on your wits at that point.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think like once he's back at the end, it is just him and his grits and wits again.
The only bad guy who's tougher than the rest is the one who's like a powerlifter. Everyone else is just a guy. This isn't like a fantasy dungeon crawl where the big boss at the end has 200 more hit points than everyone else and 17 more spells.
Mm,
He's just smart man, but still man. I think that's important to the flavor. Like, you could imagine if John Diehard got like ahead of the game earlier, maybe he could have eliminated Hans and the whole plan would fall apart.
yeah.
But that doesn't happen in fantasy space. If you kill the bad guy too early, well, jokes, it was just a clone or an illusion or some other almost Pulp Fiction-y type thing to say that actually they're still at the bottom of the dungeon. You got to keep working down. That's the encounter that I've prepped. But yeah, in this case, showing up to fight the bad guy at the very end with nothing but a gun strapped to your back is still a plausible way to win, quote unquote.
Because there's not attrition for you, but it is absolutely attrition for the bad
Yes,
guys.
100%. All right, so we've got a location that is tied to some form of a map structure, whether that's we're generating on the fly or we've built a location, point crawl or something like that. We've populated it with guys and random encounter type things that we can roll on or choose from as the pacing dictates.
Mm-hmm.
We've got points of interest that the bad guys have to be at to satisfy the bangs on their timeline, their kicks that have to happen. We've got time pressure in here just by virtue of that kick timeline. And we've got the hard choices that are going to eventuate from us throwing like 3 of these cards down of one of your contacts from the party is being threatened and there are 2 bad guys and they're in this room.
Yep. We've also got a broad sort of structure for how our play session is going to go, where we know we're going to start with some soft intros, then we're going to go into a phase where for some reason everyone is separated across different points of the map and
It's
have to
the ante you meet in a tavern. You were in a tavern and you're all in 4 spots now.
you unmeet. So yeah, we have that first intro phase. We have the everyone is out of the room when the hostages are taken. We have the players over that next sort of phase working to come back together and make a plan, and then we have them kind of executing that plan, whether that plan is saving the hostages or defeating the villain or foiling the plot or letting the, like, whatever it is, like, that's, where we have room to play, where the players have room to be creative about what it is that they want to sort of set their objective to be. And I think you probably the stuff we've described around, the maps and the rooms and the encounters and the points, it's flexible enough that you can be like, okay, well, the players have decided that they're going to focus on foiling the heist. Great, we're just going to keep playing through the heist and see how they foil it. Or they've decided that they want to get the hostages out. Like, great, we're still going to play through the heist, but that becomes the reason that the bad guys are like out of the room. Like,
yep, no, totally agree with that. Like, they have an ultimate goal, but they have to react to the challenges that complicate things along the way.
Yeah.
One thing that I do think is worth putting in there is something like the radio system, because it gives you such an easy way to drop information about those kicks to the players. So, everyone sharing the channel makes it really fun, because the bad guys can say things like, layer 2 of the vault is now open.
Yep.
And I think this would almost be a visible tracker that I would put in front of the players, where maybe not like a Blades in the Dark clock, but like a timeline that I'm crossing off the notches on as they make their way through. And, any other little tidbits that you want to drop in there to be like, your players have split up and one of them's causing a diversion elsewhere. The bad guys talk over the radio and say, I've spotted hostiles in this sector, I'm going to check it out. So that means that the other team knows when the thing has worked, and it fits in fiction really well.
Yeah.
I think that's most of the things that would be critical. I think something that I would have in my back pocket is just a list of names of people at the party and like a 1-sentence description of who else is there. And I would absolutely be pulling from that list. If the players are getting complacent, I would be pulling names from that list and being like, they're going to kill this person. If things don't happen, they'll execute a hostage.
Which again is another kind of like countdown timer that you can have visible to them. That sounds really solid.
I think it's got a lot of strong structural elements that we can have a really fun and, I think notably, super dynamic environment. Where if you were to throw this down for 4 different groups, I think you'd have 4 wildly different diehards occur out of it. All right. So that structure's pretty strong. We just need a game to play it in.
I think this is we need a mechanic to resolve conflicts situation. I don't think we need a hugely heavy game to operate this in. I think most of the game we've actually already described, and it is in kind of the scenario design. So I think this is one of those scenarios where we just need something with a nice, easy resolution mechanic, a way to structure the scenes, give them some like ebb and flow back and forth. But I don't know that we necessarily need a full catastrophe. My favorite go-to for when I'm like, I just need a core mechanic because I've already come up with a system, is a tiny 1-page RPG, or I think it's actually 6 pages. But a tiny 6-page RPG called Rhesus, which is like everyone has attributes. The attributes are ranked in number of dice, and when you roll roll a contest, you roll that number of dice against a bad guy, and the loser loses 1 die from their pool, and that's it. That's the whole game, which does make me wonder why it takes 6 pages. But something like that, I'm sure someone has done a 1-page RPG about this.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was going to suggest the great 1-page hack would be Lasers and Feelings.
I was also going to say Lasers
and we would call it Grits and Wits.
Yes, we've done that thing where we're on the same wavelength. I'm like, that classic, like, you have two stats, and as one increases, the other decreases, and they're never going to be precisely equal. Like
I
grits and wits, lasers and feelings.
I was originally thinking it would just be gun and feelings, and like John McClane's like chats with Al are his feelings moments, or whenever he's talking
Yep.
to his wife are his feelings moments, and literally everything else is gun. But yeah, grits and wits is the ideal case here. Very simple resolution mechanic, easy way to represent if you get advantages in game because you've picked things up. You know, you just get the extra dice for rolling against. Like really lightweight,
Mm.
and the implication is that your characters aren't going to die easily.
Mm.
I think there is a version where you can play this with threat of death, but ultimately you want people to make it to the showdown.
Yeah.
So you want them to be able to escape with consequences, but not just eat shit and die the first time they come across a terrorist with a gun.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I have thought of over the course of this ep is maybe this would be a great liminal horror hack. I think there's a lot of things that are to like about that system. I think the inventory and wound system is good. I think the mechanics it gives you for filling out rooms as you go is really good. Yeah, again, the whole thing about like backtracking, I think is right on point. So I would have to go and do some research on that and figure out if that is like based on something that we can like go back to, or if it is something where we would have to hack that forward into a Die Hard-esque thing. But I think there's a lot to
It's already got a
recommend.
lot of structure that you can play off.
It's got some stuff that's right. I guess the last step there is this is one of those situations where we have a really strong structure and that's providing most of the jus, and we're just looking for a resolution mechanic. I think this is one where you could write a one-page RPG super easily. And I think it's one that lends itself to like some fun one-shot products or fun like riffs on the original movie that might play a little bit differently. So there's two that I've come up with over the course of the show. And one is I think it would be a really fun one for, as we were talking about, like laying down tiles. I think you could do a really fun set of like dungeon tiles where you're like laying down like geoglyph type things on a map, and building the office tower out that way. I think that could be super fun. Again, you have to make a bunch of cards and it's a whole ass product, but I think that could
We
be super
design
fun.
sessions, not games, but here's some games you could design.
But here's some games that I'm just designing off the top of my head.
The rest is left up to the reader.
The other one that I think could be super fun is if you really wanted to lean into that like solo aspect of things. I think it could be super fun to do this as a 3-player RPG where you have the game master running the villains and the cops, and then you just have 2 players, and one of them is Al on the radio and one of them is John in the building. And I think that could be a really fun like 3-person dynamic.
That'd be very interesting because the conversation at the table is the radio channel.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's plausible why you know everything about everyone else's plans.
Yeah, so John, and again, you have 3 very asymmetrical players. Obviously, the game master is almost playing like XCOM, right? They're moving lots of pieces around a board. John is playing a like hero shooter, and the guy in the van, like that, the Al character is almost doing a like soft negotiation, like power play, politicsy, like trying to convince people to on the outside to act in certain ways. So you have one player who's playing an action game, one player who's playing a point and click like narrative adventure with a branching sort of story tree and influence system and stuff. And then the game master is like in the back playing XCOM.
I think that'll be trivial to design.
Yeah, easy. We'll just design 3 interrelated but independent sets of game mechanics.
And somewhere in the middle of the table is Guess Who, the board game.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'd be fun. If you can design that, I'd play that.
Yeah, it's unlikely. This is me putting it out in the world and hoping someone else will do the work.
I thought your 3-player game was going to be like a riff on Downfall, where after you finish building your city and how it's going to collapse, like what its ultimate flaw is, somebody will take the role of a villain, somebody will take the role of a protagonist, and someone will take the role of the supporting character who's part of the status quo
I love
and
that.
contrasts with the protagonist. And then you rotate scenes. So when you
Yeah,
hit the next scene, everyone's role moves one space to the left.
that would be great fun too. Downfall, but set in Nakatomi Plaza.
I love Downfall as, yeah, phenomenal game. Liminal Horror, correct me if I'm wrong, but Liminal Horror is kind of a OSRE or new SRE type game, right?
Yeah.
I was going to suggest something kind of similar. I was going to suggest like a Knave style game where you are classless and inventory is effectively your class. So as you pick up gun and rope and such, that becomes the useful thing that you can do in situ. It is also a very lightweight game and kind of has the same vibe of when you take damage, your inventory slots start disappearing. And I think that gives a reasonable enough buffer so that you don't just get shot and die. Yeah, I think it's hard to play an OSR game with high lethality because if your characters die really early, you don't get the satisfying Die Hard experience, and it's awkward to bring new ones in unless you've just got more hostages distributed around
I was
the
gonna say
game.
you can always have a spare hostage that you find in a cupboard, but
You can do it, but it doesn't feel like a John McClane, you know?
yeah.
Like, imagine if John McClane was just like hiding in a cupboard for 90 minutes of the 2 hour film.
And then someone
And
found
then,
him and was like, "Come with me," and he was like, "Okay, I guess I'm an adventurer now."
yeah, that doesn't feel like Die Hard. So I think you can play this in a OSR game. I think you just have to be a little bit cautious and maybe pull punches before it gets to the bit where you just kill your players outright. Kill
Mm.
your characters outright.
Yes, we kill characters, not players. Don't kill your players. Oh boy.
So yeah, I think that would be kind of my pick. I would go either like a one pager with a resolution mechanic, like Grits and Wits, our new lasers and feelings hack, or I would go for a OSR style game that has a bit of support for a point crawly type thing and is otherwise relatively rules light.
Mm.
Should put out an honorable mention. Mothership has a module that is called what is it, like Dying in Hard Light Station or Dying Hard in Hard Light Station, something along those lines, which is built around this premise. Now, I have not run that, but I have been a player in it, and I think it gets some of the things right, but not all of them. It plays very much like a Mothership module, but not like a Die Hard experience.
Interesting. Isn't Mothership the one that is supposed to feel a bit like Alien?
Yes.
That's interesting because, as mentioned,
Yeah.
Die Hard is just Alien, but from the point of view of the alien.
So I think it gets an honorable mention. I think it's got stuff that you could strip mine for it. But having been a player in it with a good DM, it didn't sing the way that I'd hoped it would.
Yeah.
And I played it as a Christmas special, not the Christmas just gone, but the one before.
Yep. Would you run it in 5e?
No, because there's too many ways to break the constraints.
Yeah.
Like I come to this very often when we come to magic systems in 5e, which is a huge part of the game. I think you could run it straight with just skills and attributes, but as soon as you introduce some player abilities and the whole schools of magic, you end up being able to undo a lot of the things that make this story what it is.
Yeah, it's very hard to strip players of all of their gear as well and be like, you start with no shirt and no shoes. Like
I
that
mean, I
ain't the
do think
5e.
this really works well as a one shot. I wouldn't play this. Like, I think a single session is what makes this game sing. I think if you have to pause and come back next week or next fortnight or next month, trying to remember which bad guys are up and where they are, and like, I think your ability to make hard decisions diminishes.
Yeah, doesn't really fly. I don't think
No.
I'd bother either.
So yeah, it just doesn't feel like a good fit. It's a very square peg round hole. I think you could do it. I don't think it'd be fun.
Classic line for me. I think I would consider it as a like Christmas special in an ongoing campaign where we don't really care about providing a super authentic Die Hard experience. It's really more about like seeing how these characters do it. But no, if I'm sitting down for Die Hard night, I'm not busting out the player's handbook. Last question, would you run it?
Absolutely. I think this would be so fun. And I think I would really want to run this for a bunch of groups that play very differently, just so that I get the fun of recycling the content and seeing very different emerging stories come out of it.
Absolutely. I think this one is ripe for like a convention game because I think you're right. I think it's easy to power through in a couple of hours. It's at its best if it's short and sharp. And yeah, you could get so much mileage out of one set of like putting together one set of like quite quality play materials, play aids, like maps or cards. I think con people would absolutely like lose their shit if you are like, and then you bust out the guess who board as a bit of a reveal and be like, these are the ones who you've knocked out. Like, I think they would.
I think there's
absolutely
instant player literacy for that. Well, as soon as you see that, you're like, oh, I immediately grok the whole situation. I know what to do. Yep.
And the film itself is so ubiquitous and like well known that if you're like, we're doing Die Hard, people know what kinds of things they should be doing, which again I think makes it a good.
I think it's relatively easy to like prime them and be like, getting shot is bad, fighting outright is bad. You got to use your wits and your grits to get through these ones.
Yeah. So yeah, yes, I would run it, and I would run it in a very specific context.
Absolutely. I think it could be hella fun. I mean, there's a reason this story is so well referenced in everything else. It's a great film. It's tightly structured.
To the point where like it becomes a trope to just be like, oh, it's Die Hard on a plane, it's Die Hard on a boat. It's like it's now a genre that it has become a genre unto itself.
Oh my god. Cowboy Die Hard?
I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but I'm sure someone's done it.
Twangy jazz noises. Right?
Is that Die Hard?
That's Die Hard.
Have we solved Die Hard?
We have died hard. Died tough.
Died easy.
No, wrong game.
We make Die Hard easy.
Live easy by dying hard.
All right, this has been Playtonics. We are on the internet at playtonics.net and wherever you get your podcasts, but you already know that because you've just listened to the podcast. The best thing you can do for us if you enjoyed the show is send it to a friend, send it to a game master, send it to a player, send it to someone who's interested in the thing that we talked about but has never considered running it as a game.
I dare you to send it to one of your like super sharer friends. Someone who's absolutely just going to recommend it to 1,000 other people. That'd be great.
Yeah, I dare you to do that. Yeah, send people an episode that you think that they would like, because that's why we do episodes on a bunch of different topics. There's a couple of ways that you can stay in touch with us. We've got a newsletter where we post new episodes and sometimes blog posts too. We've got social medias where you can, this year I'm doing this new thing where I actually post on our socials, and it's usually just about the stuff that I've been reading or watching for the show. So if you want narky takes on stuff as I read it or watch it, follow us on Blue Sky, Threads or Mastodon. There's links on the website. And if you want actual content which is thoughtful and about role-playing games and not just bad riff tracks of old shows in tweet form, you can follow us or keep an eye out for us on Reddit, which is the thing that Jordan is at the helm of for the most part, and that is like actually thoughtful takes on interesting things to do with role-playing systems and game design. So that's where you should go if you're after that kind of stuff. I think that's it. I think that's everything. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Bye.
Bye.